Today we're going to compare Canon's crop sensor mirrorless cameras. In front of me I have Canon M200, the M50, and the M6 Mark II. There are also some older models like the M3 or the M5 that came out around 2015 and 16, but these are their more current offerings. So today we're going to compare these three cameras and see what their strengths and weaknesses are so you can decide which camera might be the right one for you. There's no time for an intro, let's get started. The M200 is the newest camera out of the three, and right now the M200 costs $549 with the 15 to 45 kit lens, and camera prices sometimes go up and down, and at the time of recording this it is actually $499 on B&H. And from what I understand, Canon does not sell this camera without the lens, so that's the lowest price you'll have to pay for the camera. And the M50 is the oldest camera here, so the prices might vary depending on where you buy it from, but on B&H it was $579 brand new body only and $599 with the kit lens yesterday, but today it is $479 body only and $499 with the lens. So I'm not sure if that's a temporary discount, but that's a great deal. So if you're a first-time camera buyer, it might be worth it to get the lens for the extra $20. And it looks like the M6 Mark II is also discounted. The M6 Mark II's launch price was $849 body only, but now it's $799. So it's still quite a bit more expensive than the other two, but $50 lower now. And even though it's the most expensive camera here, unlike the M50, it's missing a viewfinder. And with these digital cameras, and for those who are used to taking pictures with their smartphones, the viewfinder may not be absolutely necessary. But if you do want a viewfinder for the M6 Mark II, there's a separate unit that you can purchase that attaches to its horseshoe mount, and that's an additional $200. Currently, apart from the M6 Mark II, all the other AFM mount cameras have the same 24 megapixel sensor, and only the M6 Mark II has Canon's newest 32 megapixel sensor. 32 megapixels may sound like a lot compared to 24, but if you overlay the images on top of each other, it's about this much difference. Here, I tested the cameras with the Sigma 30mm 1.4, which is one of the sharpest lenses that I have, and only when I zoomed all the way in to 300%, I kind of slightly see the subtle difference. Unless I'm looking at them side by side like this, which I never will, I don't think I'll be able to tell which is which. These three cameras all have the same Digic 8 processor, and they all have the same native ISO range from 100 to 25,600. So in theory, the M200 and the M50 should be identical in terms of image quality because they have the same sensor and the processor. At ISO 3200 and 6400, there's a very little difference between the images, and the M200's and M50's images seem virtually identical as expected. At ISO 12800, the M6 Mark II starts to pull ahead thanks to its newer sensor. I mean, it's still a subtle difference, but there's much less noise, and as you can see, it's retaining more details in the darker areas of the photo. At 25,600, again, the M6 Mark II's photo looks a lot better, but I'll say for casual shooting, all three photos are quite acceptable. They all have the maximum mechanical shutter speed of 1/4000th of a second, and only the M6 Mark II can shoot with the electronic shutter up to 1/16,000th of a second. If you don't know what that means, it probably means you don't need it, but if you shoot a lot with fast primes on extremely bright sunny days, the electronic shutter might be useful sometimes. The M6 Mark II also stands out in its shooting speed as well. It can take pictures up to 14 frames per second or up to 30 frames per second in 18 megapixel crop mode. The M50 can shoot up to 10 frames per second, and the M200 up to 6.1 frames per second, but in continuous tracking mode they drop down to about 7 and 4 frames per second respectively. The M6 Mark II also has the most advanced autofocusing system. Autofocus performance is tricky to judge on paper based on numbers, and at the end of the day, you only need one good shot in focus, but combined with the higher frame rate, you're going to have a lot more options to choose from with the M6 Mark II than with the other cameras. If you're into shooting video at all, these three cameras offer some different packages. First of all, they can all shoot great 1080p videos, so if you just want to shoot videos for social media or YouTube, or just your family vacations, 1080p should be more than good enough. My videos are all shot in 1080p as well. Not a lot of people have a 4K TV or a monitor, and you also need a very fast computer and enough storage space to edit 4K videos. If you do still want to shoot 4K, I would say you should go with the M6 Mark II. The other two cameras can also shoot 4K, but their 4K videos are heavily cropped and the autofocus is not as good in 4K. But with the M6 Mark II, you get the uncropped 4K with the same great autofocus. The only difference in 1080 is that the M200 cannot shoot 24 frames per second, at least at the time of recording this. That was also the case with the M6 Mark II, but with the recent firmware update, now it can. And the M50 always could. Canon did announce that 24p is coming for the M200 as well, but no one knows exactly when. Another advantage that the M6 Mark II has is the fact that it can also shoot 120 frames per second in 1080. The M200 and the M50 can also shoot slow-mo, but only in 720. But all three cameras lose autofocus when you're shooting 120 frames per second video. I think as long as they're shot in good lighting and you get the focus right, the 720p videos look pretty decent as well, but obviously the 1080p is sharper. There's a lot of differences in the hardware as well. As you can see, the M50 is the only camera with the viewfinder and the rear screen that flips out to the side, and the M200 screen only flips up to the top like this and it doesn't flip down, and the M6's screen flips either down or up towards the front like this. The body design of the M6 is definitely targeted more for intermediate and advanced users because it has more buttons and dials so you can change settings more quickly and easily. The additional dial on the top lets you adjust the aperture without having to press any buttons like on the other cameras, and the dedicated manual and autofocus switch with the back focusing button is a nice touch that a lot of advanced users might like. It also feels most substantial and less plasticky. Even without the viewfinder, the body weighs 408 grams, about 30 grams heavier than the M50, and even though the body is not much bigger than the M200, the grip is much deeper. The M200 is the smallest and the lightest camera here at 299 grams with the least number of buttons and dials, so you will have to rely more on the touchscreen. It doesn't even have all the shooting modes like the other cameras do. There's basically auto, manual, and video. If you want different shooting modes like program or aperture or shutter priority, they can only be accessed through the back screen. I usually prefer having as many buttons and dials as possible with a bigger grip, but it's also kind of fun to have such a simple and tiny camera, and I think most typical users of this camera might prefer that. One thing that I really like about the M200 is the fact that you can access the SD card from the side. With the M50 and the M6 Mark II, the SD card slot is in the battery compartment. So when they're on a tripod or a gimbal, since these are all such small cameras, most tripod plates block the access to the battery compartment, so it's nice that you don't have to take the plate off every time you want to access the SD card. But unlike the other two cameras, the M200 lacks the microphone jack, which is crazy because it seems like it would be such a great camera for vloggers. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I always use a separate voice recorder because it sounds better anyway, but it's not the most elegant and the simplest solution. Another difference worth noting is the onboard flash. The M200 and the M6 Mark II have the spring-loaded pop-up flash, and the M50 has a more traditional looking one on the top of the viewfinder. I personally like the flashes on the M200 and the M6 Mark II better because with these, you can flip them back with your finger to point it to the ceiling instead of directly at your subject. With pretty much any flash or camera, you do not get the most ideal results when you shoot with the flash directly pointed at your subject, so these are really nice. The M200 and the M50 use the same LPE12 battery, and the M6 Mark II uses the slightly bigger LPE17 battery, the same battery that goes inside the EOS RP. According to Canon, the M200 is rated at 315 shots per battery and 305 shots with the M6 Mark II and 235 shots with the M50, but based on my experience, these numbers are usually pretty underrated and you should be able to expect at least 400 or maybe up to 450 shots with these batteries. And for video, I tested them side by side, and surprisingly, the M6 Mark II ran out of battery first at 2 hours and 1 minute mark, and the M200 at 2 hours and 7 minutes, and the M50 lasted 2 hours and 8 minutes, probably all within margin of error. One thing I noticed while testing the battery life, the M6 Mark II seems to get quite a bit warmer than the other two cameras, even while shooting the same 1080p videos. Not to the level it made me worry, and it was nothing unusual, but it was just surprising because the other two cameras got barely warm. Once the M6 Mark II was completely cooled down, I charged up the battery again and tried 4K, and the camera kept overheating and shutting down at 50-minute mark, so I couldn't test the full battery life. So although the uncropped 4K on the M6 Mark II is a nice option, I wouldn't try to shoot anything for more than 30 or 40 minutes at a time. So overall, I think all these three cameras can offer something different, and for the price you're paying, I don't think you can go seriously wrong with any of them. But for most beginners and first-time camera buyers, I think I'm going to still recommend the M50 because I feel like it's the most complete package for the price, and it's the same price as the M200 and about $300 cheaper than the M6 Mark II. So you'll be able to spend that extra money on a new lens, which will potentially make a much bigger difference in your images than more megapixels or a 4K video. The M200 I think can appeal to two different types of audiences. First is a beginner or a casual shooter who just needs the most basic, easy, and simple camera that's better than a smartphone or a point-and-shoot camera. And second is a more advanced shooter who wants a small secondary camera that's fun to use and easy to travel with. And that's why I bought this camera as well. This is not a rental or a review unit, this is my own camera, and I bought this because I thought it would be fun to use it as a street photography camera, although I'm just stuck in this house for now. With the 22mm f2 lens, it's really not much bigger than my Ricoh GR3 when it's on, and it may not have the best ergonomics, but if you use it with a strap, the size and weight of the camera definitely makes up for it. The M6 Mark II is the most expensive camera here, but if you're a more experienced photographer who enjoys the better controls or a videographer who needs 4K, the price difference might be worth it. It is definitely the most comfortable camera to use out of the three, and $800 may sound like a lot here, but if you compare it to some other competitors like the Canon's M90D or Sony's a6400 or 6600, I think it's still a pretty good deal. So that's it for me today. Thank you for watching, and if you have any more questions about these three cameras, just leave a comment down below, and if you are interested in purchasing any one of these, just check out the links in the description. So thank you for watching again, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.